Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new, welcome. My name is Amanda Dewald. I am a wife and mama of now 3 boys, 7, 5, and currently 2 months old. If you haven't clicked the little subscribe button, make sure you do that. Turn your notifications on so you get notifications when I put videos up. I know it has been a while since I've been on here, and I had every intention of bringing you videos throughout every little nook and cranny of my pregnancy and birth and postpartum and whatnot. And the birth came and then postpartum came and it just didn't go that way. But I am back. I am super excited to share all kinds of stuff with you. So today I'm here. I am so excited to let you know that our little one has arrived. His name is Adam Benjamin Dewald, and he was born on November 30th. And I am here today to share with you the birth story of Adam. So I did write it out, and I hope that it's helpful for you in some way. So I will go ahead and get started. On Sunday, I didn't write the date in here, but it was November 29th. At night, I was 40 weeks and 3 days. I had gone past my due date in previous pregnancies, and I knew baby would be coming in his own time, right? We all know that. Baby comes when baby is ready. There's really no forcing it. You can try different things. Maybe some things might help, but in my personal opinion, if they helped, it was because baby was ready. But anyway, that night was extra hard, and I was just feeling huge. I was feeling super uncomfortable. I was swollen. I was cranky, all the works, right? And I was laying in bed complaining to my husband, and I was like, it literally feels like this baby is never coming. And my husband said this to me. He said, he's coming, and I bet he will be here within the next 3 days. That was his guess. He's like, give it 3 days, he'll be here. So we kissed each other goodnight and we fell asleep. And at 2:30 in the morning, I woke up, not because of the usual 2 a.m. having to pee, right? If you are a pregnant mama, you can relate. But it was because I was in pain. And I felt like I was getting period cramps. So I knew this was a good sign. And as I had lots of experience with false labor earlier in the pregnancy. So if you watched my videos, I already kind of talked all about that. And I didn't want to get too excited though, since I had had experiences with that before. I was like, I'm not gonna wake him. I don't want to get too excited. It's probably nothing. I'm just gonna try to go back to sleep. Well, after about, I don't know exactly how long it was, probably was about 20 minutes of trying to fall back asleep, I knew I wasn't gonna be able to sleep. It was a mixture of being uncomfortable because it was painful, and also because I was excited. I was like, maybe this is it. Maybe baby's really coming. So I decided I was going to go downstairs. I wasn't going to wake up Dan. I didn't know how long labor was going to be, what it was going to be like. I wanted him to have the energy to take care of me while I was in labor. I went downstairs. I folded about 3 baskets of clean laundry that were all over my floor that I had been avoiding. And after I tidied up the house, I drank a ton of coconut water. I don't know what it was, but for 2 weeks prior to giving birth, and then for about 2 to 3 weeks after, I was craving coconut water like no other. My husband bought so much coconut water. At one point he was like, do you really need all this coconut water? It's kind of expensive. And I was like, my body needs it. I don't know. But that has died down. I did some bouncing on my ball. I did some meditation. And then I decided that I would take a shower. Child interruption yet again. Welcome to motherhood. Anyway, okay. So where was I? So I decided I was going to take a shower. At that point, my contractions were, I don't know, every 10 to 12 minutes, and they would last for about a minute or two. They weren't anything crazy. So I was like, I'm going to take a shower now because in case these amp up, I know I might not be able to. So I took a shower and that felt amazing. The hot water on my back was so soothing. I probably stayed in the shower for 30 minutes. It felt so good. So finally I got out, and after I got out of the shower, my contractions kind of picked it up a notch. And at this point, it was around 5 or 6 a.m. and Dan was up. So I told him that I was pretty sure that I was in labor, but I didn't think we would be meeting our little guy anytime soon. So my guess was that we would meet him around dinner, because Dan was like, well, what do you think? What do you think? Which is like a silly question to ask, because we have no idea. But I was like, I don't know, maybe like dinner time. I was like, I just feel like this is like gonna be my longest labor. Like, I feel like it's gonna go really slow. After timing my contractions for a while, I concluded that my contractions were about 1 to 2 minutes long, and at this point around every 8 to 10 minutes. So we called the midwife and our doula to let them know that I was likely in labor, and we were opting for a home birth, as I've discussed in previous videos, but at our midwife's house. And this is what we had done for our second. So if you're confused by that, I have another video. I'll put it in the description that kind of like explains that whole scenario. So anyway, the midwife told us we could come in anytime since they opened at 7:30 anyway. So we told them we would come in when we felt like we needed to, and the doula told us to let her know when we were leaving so that she could meet us there. So we checked our bag, we called the babysitter, Dan called into work that morning, we continued to get ready. At 7 o'clock, the boys were up, and my contractions were definitely getting much more intense. They were about 60 seconds in length at this point, and every 4 to 5 minutes. I couldn't talk through these contractions, so I told Dan, this baby is coming way sooner than I thought, and we need to leave ASAP. Like, where is the babysitter? We need to go. So as soon as the babysitter arrived at the house, which was my father-in-law, came over to watch the kids, but he lives about a half an hour away. So once he got to the house, we left, and I continued to labor in the car. So I remembered from my last birth that relaxing and staying focused and remaining calm was the best way to maximize the progress and to minimize the pain. So trust me, it sounds a lot easier than it actually is, but I tried really, really hard to just like not really talk in the car, just focus, you know, be in the moment, work through the contractions. And we arrived at the midwife's around 8 a.m. and our doula and midwife were already there, obviously. They helped us settle in, they took my vitals, they watched a few contractions and monitored the baby through a contraction just to make sure that he was all good and wasn't showing any signs of distress or anything like that. They asked me if I wanted the tub filled up, and we had discussed in previous visits how much I was looking forward to the tub because it really helped my labor. I didn't actually birth in the tub with my second, but I did labor in it, and it just helped tremendously. So I told them immediately that I wanted it filled up and that I wanted to get in it because I wanted to labor as long as I could in the tub because I remember just feeling so much better. So once the tub was filled, I got in the tub and I immediately felt like relief. Immediately. It was incredible. If you have an opportunity to at least labor in a tub, I would strongly suggest it. Like warm water just feels so incredible. If this was the case for you too, please put it in the comments so we can share with other mamas and let them know like what things were helpful and weren't helpful. At this point, my contractions had calmed down a bit, and I was not able to talk through them, but I was still able to chat like in between, and I felt really good in between each contraction, which was super weird. I didn't experience that with my second. It was like or my first, really. Like once I started getting heavy contractions, it was just like I couldn't talk, I couldn't do anything like throughout the whole thing. This was like very different. I'd get a contraction, I couldn't talk through it, I couldn't really move, do anything. But then once it was gone, I literally felt like I wasn't in labor. It was very odd. And I remember like talking to my doula and my husband about it, and it was like every time I said something about it, it would change up. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird. Like I just feel so normal in between. And then like 5 minutes later, it was not like that at all. So it was very interesting. But anyway, at this point, I was nervous that my labor wasn't progressing. I'm sure it was probably more in my head than anything else, but in my head, that's how I felt. So I tried to relax my body as much as I could and focus on bringing this baby into the world. I really allowed my contractions to do their job while I breathed through them as calmly as possible. A few I got loud for, and I could feel that when I let go of that calm control, the pain was so much worse. So I guess like if you were to ask me what is your number one suggestion like while you're in labor, just really try to stay focused and calm. And it sounds so crazy because in the moment it's the hardest thing to do. But the more calm I was, and if I just breathed through it and like told myself like, you can do this, you're amazing, like your body knows what it's doing, like all those affirmations were going through my head. And if I could just breathe through it, it was so much better, because there were a few times where I was just like, F this, like this hurts, I'm just gonna yell. And those were so much worse. Like it was a huge difference. So I would suggest to you to try your hardest to just like be as calm as possible. I did a lot of meditation and breath work during my pregnancy. So I think that really helped me when I got into birth. Anyway, so after I realized that was worse, I quickly reverted back to just focusing on my breathing. And it was a very calm, quiet laboring. Keyword, laboring. We'll get to the pushing part later, but laboring was very calm. My doula was amazing at reminding me to breathe. I know I had talked in videos, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go with a doula this time, for various reasons that I've already talked about. And I am so glad that I did, like 100%. She was amazing. I think it was definitely worth my money. She did exactly what I wanted her to do. So she suggested some pressure on my low back. So Dan was applying pressure on my low back throughout the contractions and running warm water over me, which felt amazing. So actually he had like a mug. And so I was in the tub, like kind of like this, like on the side. And every time I was having a contraction, they could just tell, because obviously like my head went down and I would just like breathe through it. And so Dan would like take the mug and scoop water onto my back and then kind of like rub it like this on my lower back. And it just felt amazing. And he said it was nice for him because it was less work for him to use the mug and do it. I don't know like if that's like a thing or whatever, but it felt so good. Just the warm water hitting it and then that little bit of pressure was exactly what I needed. So it helped me focus where I needed to focus and allow my body to do its job. Because again, your body knows what it's doing. You are built for this. So you really have to, like, in my opinion, I think birth is mostly just about like surrendering and trusting your body. Like you keeping your focus and not going crazy, like just keeping focused and remaining calm and doing your breath work so that your body can do it. Because you're not really doing it. Like your body's going to do it whether you do it or not. So anyway, here I am going off on tangents. This is why I write it down. Where was I? So my doula was encouraging me to drink between contractions, so I stayed hydrated. And I'm really grateful that she was there, because I don't think that's something I would have done without her. Like I didn't want to drink. I didn't want anything. Like I just wanted to be and to just like have that tunnel vision and focus. And so her being there to remind Dan, like in between contractions, to give me the drink, and even though I didn't want it, like I knew I should. So I just kept drinking that coconut water, which was great because it has electrolytes in it. So drinking that coconut water in between contractions, I feel like I drank a ton, which was really helpful then, and probably one of the reasons why I felt so amazing afterward, which I'll talk about. So I drank a ton of coconut water, and the midwives had appointments that morning, so they were kind of like in and out of the room. So throughout most of the labor, it was me, my husband, and my doula. And the midwives would come in and they would check me and they would check baby, but they were still kind of doing their thing, just monitoring. And so that was another reason why I was really glad that my doula was there, because although I feel like it would have been fine, me and Dan, there got to be a point where, obviously I felt like I needed to push and I had to tell someone. Sorry if you hear my kids, they're like playing right outside my room. And I would have not wanted him to leave the room. So at this point it was nice because my doula then, went and got the midwives where Dan could stay there with me during the contractions. So I was never alone, which was really, really awesome. I don't think I would have ever liked at any point to be like alone. So I was really grateful to have my husband and my doula with me, because between the three of us, I felt very supported, and I knew that the midwives were just down the hallway if I needed them. So I don't recall what time it was at this point, but I got to the point where I no longer could communicate during contractions or in between them. I remember at one point the midwife came in to do a check, and I was just kind of doing my thing. I didn't lift up my head, I didn't talk to her, I didn't look at her, and I heard my doula report to her that I was having very strong contractions about every 60 seconds. So that was nice, because I knew, like, Dan wouldn't have known that. Dan wouldn't have been thinking that to, like, report that to the midwife. So that was another thing. I was really grateful to have my doula there. Like, she knew, she's been to how many births, she knows what's going on, she's watching me, and she's reporting to the midwife. So I felt very safe. Like, I felt very supported throughout all of it, and that was really great for me to hear, because although I couldn't communicate, like, I could still hear them, and I still knew what was going on. So it was, like, reassuring to me to know, like, okay, Amanda, like, you've got this, you're almost there, like, we're gonna be pushing soon, and your baby's gonna be here, like, just keep going. It was like that little bit of affirmation I needed, even though she probably didn't even know that that was helpful to me, or that that helped me, to stay focused. So shortly after that, I began to feel an urge to push, but I knew that my body would do the work for me, so I tried really hard not to push. For like the next 2 to 3 contractions, I tried my hardest, even though I felt like I had to. I tried not to, because I didn't want to start pushing until I was ready. This baby was very fast. So, I tried not to push. That lasted about 2 to 3 contractions. Finally got to the point where I couldn't not push, so I literally was like pushing and telling my doula, who was sitting right there, like, I'm pushing, I can't not push anymore. So she ran and got the midwife and the midwife's assistant. They came in and they told me, like, keep going, you're doing great, like, continue to push. I never got checked at any point. So with my second, I did get checked when I felt the urge to push, because I felt like it would help me. Like, I felt like I needed it to continue, because with my first, it was in a hospital, I was induced, like, I was checked all the time. It was just a very different situation, which my personal opinion on being checked, I think whatever the mom needs is what they should do. But in my personal experience, I felt like getting checked didn't help me at all. It didn't help me dilate faster. All it did was, in my brain, say, like, oh, I'm close, even though you could not be. Like, you could be at 8 centimeters for a very long time. So all it did to me was give me more anxiety. So with my second, I only was checked when I felt the urge to push. And with this one, I knew my body was doing what it was doing. I didn't feel like I needed to be checked or anything. Like, I knew it was time. So anyway, the midwives were there. They were getting on their gloves, getting things ready for after birth and all of that. About 2 to 3 pushes later, his head was out. So I had one push where the midwives weren't really in the room, then another push while they were, like, getting stuff ready, and then the next push where they were already there, like, sitting and everything, like, his head came out. So I didn't well, hold on, let me go with what I wrote down, because I'll get all ahead of myself. So 2 to 3 pushes later, his head was out, and I will admit it, I lost control. I did not have control over this. I was not calm, I was not quiet, I was not focused. Like, all I could think in my head was, like, the pain. And I know that's not what mamas want to hear, but you get over it, it's fine, it'll be okay. So I lost all control. The other midwife actually came up because she heard my scream, and she didn't know if we needed assistance or whatever. So then I had 2 midwives, a midwife assistant, my doula, my husband. We were all there helping. And so at this point, I was in the water and almost like in a seated position. So his head was technically birthed like while I was still in the water. And so she told me that I needed to switch positions, because I wasn't in optimal position for them to catch the baby. I couldn't think. I didn't even actually know if his head was completely out at this point. So no one ever actually told me that his head came out, which is the only thing I was kind of disappointed, if that's the right word, was that everything was amazing except for the communication while I was birthing. So this is something I would encourage mamas, if you're having a birth, to mention to your midwife prior. Like, I wish I would have communicated this prior, but I didn't think I needed to, because my last midwife was very good at communicating during birth. This time, I don't know if she assumed that I knew, but I didn't actually know that his head was out. I assumed his head was out because of the way it felt, and I had had babies before, but I would have liked if she would have said, like, his head is out, like, you're doing great, mama, his head's out, like, okay, this is what's going to come next. And there wasn't that. And so I kind of started to panic in my head, because then she was telling me, you've got to move, you got to get into a different position. And so I'm in my head thinking, and this is so irrational, but this is what I thought. I was like, oh my gosh, his head is like halfway out. And now she's asking me to move, and I need to move quickly because I need to push the rest of his head out. Which doesn't even make sense, but that's what I thought in my head. So, which wasn't the case either. His head was completely out. So at this point too, the midwife had asked my husband if he wanted to catch the baby, which he had planned on catching the baby, but I will tell you a little bit later as to why he decided not to with this one. So my body took over, and I stood up out of the water. So his head's out, right? And I stood up out of the water. I was still in the tub though. And this transition with his head out was very uncomfortable. And going from like the weightlessness of being in the water to standing up and having all of that gravity all of a sudden was extremely intense. I had gravity like hit me all at once. My body left like the warm bath and was immediately contracted from like the cool air. It wasn't cold in the room, but like going from the warm water to like the cool air hitting my body and like the gravity and everything, it was the most intense feeling I think I have ever felt in my entire life. I don't recommend it. I wish that I would have been able to birth the rest of him in the water. I know that it wasn't optimal because of the way I was positioned and everything, but I think that it would have been much more comfortable if I could have done that. All right, my son just came in and told me that the baby is screaming, so I will be back. To be continued. Don't go anywhere. All right, I am back. Sorry for the short interruption, which it won't be interrupted for you, but for me it's been a few hours because the baby was crying, and then my mom was here, and then we had to go to the chiropractor and eat lunch and all these things. So here we are, back at the story. Let's just get right into it. So I think I left off in like the most exciting part. So here we are. So I was birthing him, and his head was out, and I had to stand up because I wasn't in optimal position, and it was just the most intense feeling ever. Like, I don't recommend it at all. It was very uncomfortable, and then again, like, that communication wasn't necessarily there, so I was confused and I was worried and I didn't know what was going on. And I just remember like thinking back that, well, I'll just read it because I don't want to go off on a tangent. All right. So I was nervous, and when I felt the urge to push, I just pushed with all my might. So I was standing up, right? And then the next time I felt the urge to push, I just pushed, because in my head I'm thinking like maybe his head's not out all the way, like maybe I need to get his head out. Again, I don't know why I thought that, but that's what I thought. So the transition from warm water to cool air and gravity felt terrible. I was facing away from the midwives. So I was kind of like, I was in the pool, kind of like sitting like this almost, and, birthed his head, and then got up and like turned around almost. And so I was like, kind of like standing like this. So I couldn't see anything that was going on. I was just kind of like standing, holding on to the side of the tub, and like they were behind me, like getting ready to catch the baby. And so I remember thinking in my head that something was wrong, and for some reason they were pushing the baby back inside of me, which I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous. They were not doing that. This is not what they were doing, but I'm sharing with you what was going through my head. And so in my head, for whatever reason, the way it felt, like the way my body like felt going from the warm water to standing up to having the gravity, I don't know if it was his shoulders were large, or I don't really know, because there was that like lack of communication, which is the only thing that I would probably change. Well, maybe not the only thing. I wouldn't have stood up either. But just like overall, it was a really good experience. But it felt to me in my head like they were pushing him back inside of me. And I remember thinking like, what on earth are they doing? And I just was screaming at this point because it was terrible. It was like not a good feeling at all. I'm so sorry if you're a first time mom and you're watching this and you're like, I don't want to give birth. please know that, like, although, like, looking back, those parts were terrible, like, it literally was, like, seconds, maybe a minute altogether that this was going on. Like, he came out very, very fast. My doula was so wonderful, and she took some pictures throughout the birthing process for me, which was amazing. Honestly, like, having those and looking back, like, I kind of wish I would have, like, hired a photographer. And we're done having children, but, like, if I was going to have another child in the future, I would 100% hire a birth photographer, because having those pictures is so incredible. And I wish we would have had more of, like, the actual birthing process, but she told me, she's like, normally I have pictures in between, but she's like, everything just was so fast, like, I didn't have time to grab my camera or anything, which is totally fine. But it was very fast. Like, it was like 4 or 5 total pushes and he was out. So, like, those 3 pushes or so to get his head out, and then I stood up, pushed once, and he came out. So in my head, I thought they were pushing him back up inside me. I don't know why I thought that, but that's what I thought. But really, the rest of his body was coming out, which was very interesting, because in previous births, the hardest part was the head. So getting the head out, having that ring of fire, and then the body just kind of, like, seemed so effortless. Whereas this time I feel like that was the most intense part, but I really honestly think that it was contributed to standing up out of the tub. I think that was the reason why it was so intense this time. Everyone was telling me he was here, so I turned around and I immediately got concerned. So I saw the midwife with a very, very purple baby. So when he came out, he was extremely purple, and he was purple for, like, the first week of life. Neither of my other babies were like that. His oxygen sat, like, was 100%. It was wonderful. He was getting enough oxygen. I don't know why. My midwife just said some baby skin tones are just different, but he was very purple, and I didn't hear him crying, so I immediately got nervous. And I immediately started asking, like, is he okay? Is he okay? Is he okay? Like, I just remember repeating that, like, is he okay? Is my baby okay? And I didn't hear a scream, and he wasn't really moving that much. So the second midwife came over, and she immediately assured me that he was fine, while the other midwife peeled off the amniotic sac, which was so cool. So he looked so strange to me because he was still inside of his sac. So when a baby is born in their sac, it's called Caul. I think I'm pronouncing that properly. It's Encaul. And it was just so, like, I remember when I was birthing, I never really thought about my water breaking. And it had to have kind of popped at one point, which I think it started to pop when I started pushing his head out. Because I remember feeling like a little gush, but I thought maybe I, like, peed or something. But I didn't, like, hear a sound or anything this time, probably because I was in the water, although I heard it last time. So with my second, my water didn't break until I started pushing him, but he was not born in his sac. He came out and there was no sac around him, but my water didn't break until I started pushing. With this birth, I don't know if and when my water actually broke, but when he came out, it wasn't like, so, you know, when you look up pictures of babies born in their sacs, like, a lot of times they're surrounded by fluid. So he wasn't, like, surrounded by the fluid. It was just, like, stuck to him, like he was wrapped in, like, saran wrap almost, kind of. So it was, like, really weird to see. And he was purple, and obviously since he was still in that and everything, he wasn't, like, breathing and whatnot right away. But the midwife said she's seen this many times, which is interesting because in the hospital they don't have this very often, probably because a lot of times they break your water. But anyway, so she, you know, the midwife just gently, like, peeled the sac off, and I really wish I would have gotten a picture or, like, taken a moment to really take that in, because it was such a special, like, crazy moment to be able to see that and, like, experience that. But at the time I was just so panicked, and I was like, what's wrong with my baby? Why does he look weird? Like, and I had just gone through this, like, traumatic, you know, experience, thinking they're pushing my baby back up in me, and, like, all these weird things going on in my head. And so I wasn't thinking about it at the time. But now looking back, I'm like, I wish I would have taken a second to really, like, take that all in. I wish I would have gotten pictures. But it was really cool to see. And it was, I I don't know if it was like the entire sac, but it was a huge portion of it. So if it was broken or like ripped or whatever, most of it was still on his body. It was hard for me to see too, because I was like looking behind me while this whole thing was happening, because he was still attached, right? So the cord was still there. So I couldn't just turn around because they had him and the cord was under my, legs. And so I'm like looking this way or whatever. And so earlier in the story, I told you that the midwife had asked Dan if he wanted to catch the baby, and he opted not to this time around. And the reason is because he got panicked when he saw the head come out with the sac still around it. And he said that was the strangest thing to see. Like, he didn't know what was going on. And he just was like, he looked so purple and he had the sac around his head. So he knew before I did. But it made him nervous. So he didn't end up catching Adam. He did catch Andrew. But he did end up like clamping the cord and everything. So it was just a really cool experience. And if you look up like Caul births, there's just so many like old wives' tales and stuff around it. It's really cool. I'm not going to go into detail because this video is already very long, but you can look it up. It's really neat. Okay, so again, the midwife was assuring me like, he's fine. And the other midwife was taking off the sac. And once the sac was off, he began to cry, and they put him right in my arms, which was a task in and of itself because I was like standing. So I'm standing here and they're behind me, right? So they had to put the baby like underneath my legs and like give him to me. So it was like kind of an awkward transition, but then they gave him to me and I sat down in the tub and we, bonded and stuff with the baby for quite a while. Mom life, child interruption again. This video, like, you're gonna see it all together, but this video, the making of it has been interesting. Lots of little clips. Okay. And my children are fighting right now. Cool. All right, I'm just gonna keep going because otherwise this story is never gonna be told. Okay. So they put him in my arms and it was such a magical moment. Like, in that moment, to meet your baby boy or girl, and like we were just bonding right in the tub. They cleaned up some things and were preparing for the afterbirth. So they gave him to me and, they were kind of like there if I needed them, but they were like in the room, just preparing things, getting things ready for baby, making sure that he was still warm enough in the water, and giving us that time to have that bond while he was still connected. So baby ended up arriving at 10:47 a.m. So it was just over 8 hours after I was woken up that morning with contractions. So much for this is going to be a really long labor and I don't think we're going to meet him till dinner. He was in my arms by 10:47 or shortly after. And it was a really incredible, empowering experience. Like, it was more than I could have imagined. I am so grateful for the midwives, the assistant that was there, my doula, my husband, all of the support. I know people get like really weird about home births or whatever, but this was my second home birth, and I would, like, if I were to have more children, I would 100% have another home birth. Like, it's just such a magical experience. And I've had both. I've had a hospital birth and 2 home births, and they're just so very different. Now, it could have just been my experience in, the specific hospital that I was in. Maybe other hospitals are better at making it more homey, but it just was incredible. It really, I felt supported. I was safe the whole time. It was really amazing. So anyway, at that point, the midwife told me that I would feel some cramping, and when I wanted to, I could just, push out the placenta while I was still holding him. And I was just like so kind of shocked at what had just happened and how perfect he was and that he was finally in my arms. I began to get a little chilled, so the midwife told me to try to push out the placenta so that we could get out of the tub. And I wasn't really having any strong urges to push. Like, I wasn't having those contractions like I had prior. And I was like kind of shaky from like afterbirth. So she asked if I wanted help. getting the placenta out, and I replied that I did. So she tried to help me, but like the positioning in the tub, plus I was trying to hold him, like, and I was still like in the tub and like trying to birth it out. It was just very awkward, and like I felt like I couldn't do it. So she asked if I wanted to cut the cord so it would be easier to get out of the tub. And I immediately asked, like, is it okay to cut it yet? Because I knew I wanted like delayed cord clamping, and I couldn't really, like, in my mind, I didn't know like how much time had passed or whatever. And so she said, like, at this point it should have stopped or whatever. So she felt the cord and she said it's not pulsing anymore. Like, he's gotten everything that he's gonna get from it. So as long as you're okay with cutting it, you know, you can feel it too to make sure, then we'll go ahead and cut it. So I felt it. I didn't feel anything pulsating. So I said, you know, go ahead, so that way we could get out of the tub and I could, you know, finish with everything that needed to be done. So my husband ended up cutting the cord, and he took the baby while they helped me get out of the tub and onto the bed. And so that was nice because that was like his bonding time that he had with the baby. Once I was in the bed, the midwife helped me to birth the placenta. I immediately felt like a huge amount of pressure relieved as soon as it came out. I didn't remember that with the other births. Like, maybe I did in the moment, but like looking back now, how many years later, I don't really remember that specifically. But with this one, I just remember, like, as soon as it was out, I just felt so relieved. Like, so much pressure was just like the baby was out and he was here and he was safe and perfect, and the placenta was out, and like now we could just work on healing and moving forward, you know, with our little family. And so I remember that like was just like a really nice moment. And it was really cool because they showed us the placenta. So like this wasn't necessarily right this moment, but later on when we were just like bonding and stuff, they brought the placenta over and they showed us. We got to take some pictures of it. And like she explained like what every part of it was and whatnot, which was really cool, which they did with us for our second as well. And actually our first, I think when we were in the hospital, they did show us too, which was really cool because I'm, you know, with my nursing background, I'm always interested in that stuff. So again, I immediately felt pressure relieved. Then baby was put back on my chest and I immediately started to breastfeed him. He had no problem latching on. Dan and I were just admiring all of his little features while the midwives were checking on my bleeding. The doula was prepping things for postpartum care. And the midwife continued to check my bleeding pretty regularly and asked me to drink more water and eat a meal because she was slightly concerned with the amount of blood that I was losing. So she told me that if it continued to come out at like the rate that it was coming, that they would have to give me an IV, which I agreed to if it was necessary. But she said, you know, drink some fluids first, eat some food. So we did that. I drank a whole bunch more coconut water. We ate a meal. We had tacos and it was amazing. Such a good idea. I remember just like it tasted so good to me. And so anyway, so then the next time she checked, she asked if she could manually check for clots. Because I was still losing quite a bit of blood. And she told me that it would not be comfortable, but I told her, do what you gotta do. Like, I, you know, don't want to have an issue. I don't want to have to go to the hospital. Like, you do what you gotta do so that we can just be done with this and bond with baby and move on. And so, she did end up removing like a number of very large clots that I had. So I was grateful that she did check, because if I would have like went home and then continued bleeding, and that could have caused like a really big problem. So shortly after that, the bleeding seemed to be at like a more normal amount, and I was able to get up and use the bathroom. And I remember sitting on the toilet and feeling terrified. I was terrified to pee because in both of my previous births, the first one I had an episiotomy, and the second one I had two tears actually that were bad. Bad enough that I like needed stitches. It was an experience. But anyway, so it burned really bad when I peed with both of my last births for quite a while afterward. So I was like terrified to pee. And so I had the peri bottle, and my doula had prepared like this nice herbal bath for me that she put in the peri bottle. And so I used that and I peed and it didn't hurt at all. And I was like, this is amazing. And I remember just sitting there and it literally felt like I peed forever. And I'm sure you really needed to know that. But anyway, it's just something that stuck out in my head. So I just remember, like, when I was walking back to the bed, like, I literally felt like $1,000,000. I felt like I didn't just have a baby. I didn't really feel sore down there. I didn't feel like anything. I remember feeling a lot of pain afterward with both of my other births because of like the tearing and the stitches and the episiotomy and all of that stuff. And with this birth, there was none of that. So I'm super grateful because that was one of my like main concerns, and I felt awesome. Like I had a really easy healing process down there with my lady bits. So that was really, really nice, and I'm grateful for that. We bonded with the baby while the midwives made sure that the baby was feeding okay. They checked all his vitals and his stats, and they continued monitoring my vitals and my bleeding. Baby ended up being 8 pounds, 6 ounces and 21 inches long, which was really exciting because I was nervous that he was going to be very large because my second was 9 pounds, 2 ounces. So he was smaller than my second, but larger than my first. And he was just so perfect. So anyway, about 2 hours after he was born, we were packing up to go home. The midwife went over things that we needed to keep an eye out for, things to do, things not to do, all that. And set up a time where she would come to our house the following day to check on me and baby. And obviously they told us, like, you know, if you have any of these symptoms or whatever, make sure you call and, you know, we'll come out or whatever. So we were back home before 3 p.m. And we were able to introduce our boys to their newest little brother, and it was just such a precious moment. And they were just so excited to see him and meet him and hold him. And it was so crazy because it was like, you know, I woke up at 2:30 in the morning with cramps. By 10:47, he was born. And then before 3 p.m., we were back home. And I can't tell you, you know, how awesome it is to recover in your own bed, at your own house, with your own things. And it's just amazing. I'm a huge, like, believer in home birth. Obviously, it's not for everyone. And there are certain situations where hospital births are required, but I do think that if you have an opportunity to do a home birth, I would 100% say, you know, as long as it's safe for you and for baby, go for it. So the whole experience was incredible, and I'm super grateful to my husband, our family who took care of the boys while we were gone, our doula who was so supportive throughout the whole thing, for the midwives who brought our baby safely into this world, while still allowing me to be in charge of the decisions. And after having a hospital birth and 2 home births, one of my favorite things about home birth is the freedom. So the freedom to make those decisions and not have them made for you, not being on the clock, trusting and allowing my body to do what it's made to do, the freedom to birth however I wanted to. There is something so empowering about any birth, no matter how or where you birth. I truly, truly believe that there is something extra special about knowing that I was in charge and brought my baby into this world, trusting my own body and my own decisions. So I'm super, super grateful for this opportunity. I'm glad that I was able to finally complete this video for you. And I really hope that it was helpful. I hope that it didn't scare anyone. I hope that it was helpful. If you have any questions at all, please put them in the comments. I am happy to chat with you about anything. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I've had so many of you reach out to me about different videos on Instagram, and I love it. I love connecting with you all. So if you have anything to add, please comment or reach out to me on Instagram. My handle is @AmandaDewald1. And yeah, until next time. Bye, guys.